All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's just about that time. Welcome and thank you for joining today's Industry Insights webinar, How to Achieve Synergy Between Vendors and Law Firms. My name is Jenny Ramos, and I'm the Digital Marketing Specialist here at Litera. In case you didn't know, we host the Industry Insights series every month where we highlight the latest trends and issues in the legal sector. Before we start today's session, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will run for 30 minutes with time at the end for a Q&A. If you have any questions during the session, please submit them in the questions panel below. And if we happen to run out of time, we will follow up afterwards with answers to your questions. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be emailed to you within the next day. With that said, I'll pass it over to our presenters, Nikki Shaver, who's the Director of Global Knowledge Management at Paul Hastings, and Matt James, Vice President of Pre-Sales at Litera. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Before we get started and we go through the content that we've prepared for you, in preparation for this, we found ourselves in a bit of a unique scenario with the news that I'm sure globally everyone is aware of, where even as of recent, our organization has chosen to do our part in working from home and avoiding being in mass gatherings where we can to obviously help with preventing the spread of the virus. So we find it to be kind of unique that we're having this conversation today about better ways that we can build synergy in relationships, and that's one thing that is absolutely front and center for us, where as we recognize that we cannot be in front of our customer base and we cannot provide the value face to face, we're thinking of creative ways that we can accomplish that. So hopefully through the conversation today, maybe those are things that either we can touch on, or as we start discussing this, we can brainstorm and come up with creative ways that we can continue to conduct business, we can continue to build relationships with the technology that we have at hand as opposed to the traditional face-to-face meeting. We'll obviously be discussing the synergy between law firms and vendors, the pros and cons, the ways that we've seen it work and the ways that we've seen it challenged. And I think a big focus today will be on really a pulse on the market and sometimes how we see things working in a more traditional and historic way. But as we step forward, I'd like an opportunity for Nikki and myself to give a quick introduction. So I'll hand it to Nikki and then follow.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be speaking with Litera today. I work at Paul Hastings, where I look after our innovation and knowledge functions. But I want to say at the outset that I am speaking today not on behalf of Paul Hastings, but as an individual person. And by way of further introduction, I am a lawyer by background. I worked in Australia for many years as a practicing attorney, and then I moved to Canada, where I achieved my introduction into the field of knowledge management and legal innovation. And just under 2 years ago, I moved to New York. So I come to New York and to the States via a relatively global route. And Matt and I met in Canada, didn't we, Matt?
We sure did. And I think, it's a perfect opportunity for you and I to speak on this topic, because if I look back on it, it's one of the best relationships that I've created in the marketplace. And I think we've both found success through working together in a respectful manner, but also through a good relationship. And then brief introduction for myself. I've been with the organization almost 12 years now. I do overlook our pre-sales function, which uniquely doesn't only provide sales engineers, but we have a variety of folks who are on our evangelism team, many of which who have come from similar positions of inside of a law firm or leading a law firm, and many of which have far more experience than I do, closer to 30 years. But it really gives us an opportunity to make sure that what we're doing makes sense for our customer base, that we're not dictating the way people work, but we're complementing and we're solving problems at real time. So as we progress through, we think first and foremost it's probably best to discuss why synergy is important. So I'll let Nikki start with this and then add some pieces to it. But we really think it's a good idea to identify the importance of this, and then we'll follow through with some additional detail.
Yeah, this is something I started thinking about some time ago. Obviously, in my job, I work with vendors a lot. It's really one of the central parts of my role, and has been for some time. And it's really interesting to me, as Matt said, he and I developed such a strong friendship, really, from the time that we worked together when I was working for a firm in Toronto, and he was one of the sales reps for that region. And it struck me that it's something that has been very beneficial for both of our organizations. And it's such a different type of relationship to what I think we often see between law firms and vendors. And some of the things that I hear from people who work in firms can be quite, it suggests that often people treat this relationship as one that is almost adversarial, where there is a power imbalance between the buyer and the seller, and some disrespect or suspicion because there's an assumption made that the seller is always trying to sell rather than to provide real value. And increasingly, especially as the legal tech ecosystem has evolved, I think that's such a limited perspective, in the sense that what we see frequently now is when you work together with vendors in a partnership rather than that kind of adversarial model, there are enormous gains to be had for the law firm as well. For example, providing feedback on a regular basis can actually lead to tools being developed in line with what a law firm needs. And I've seen it happen more than once, where a solid relationship with a vendor and a regular feedback process has actually led to new functionalities being developed that are beneficial for the vendor because they have been able to promote and sell those to additional firms, and beneficial to the firm because they directly address the needs of their particular user base.
Yeah, I would also speak to that exact scenario there, where often we want to be the expert when it comes to the technology, and one of the more exciting things for us to do is to hear that feedback and then be able to present innovation to the law firm, right? Here's what we heard you say, here's what we've designed. Tell us if we're hitting the mark on that. And that back and forth is something that our head of product is a huge advocate of. I'd also say, as you were talking there, Nikki, there's a concept of bag diving in the sales world, which is, what about this? What about this? And if that's not a fit, how about this? And that's not the concept of value whatsoever, right? That is someone just trying to sell. And I could see why, that perception has been created over time. But really, one of the things that I see to be the barrier is the cadence in which people communicate and how they choose to communicate. If we're doing our job, we're making sure that we're educating the market on what we're doing, and that we're there when the firm is ready to engage in a particular project like that. And often when we don't get that understanding of when it is because of the lack of communication, I think that's where things can start to go a bit south because of the constant outreach and so forth. So I've really started to see that the way we consume technology is changing, but the way that we have gone through the purchasing process has really remained very traditional, almost to the point where there's a winner and loser when it comes to negotiation, or we're sitting on different sides of the table as opposed to, attacking the problem together.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Matt, about the fact that we are consuming technology differently, but our processes haven't changed. And as you say, the whole process of product development is user first, or should be. And so why would you not carry that through to the way that you also sell? To me, it's a natural extension.
Absolutely. I think we often internally discuss how the complexities of what we do need to be showcased, and simplicity of use, which is a bit challenging at times. So as we move on, what commonly goes wrong with vendor and law firm relationships? I'll take I apologize for the background noise here. I'll go on mute and hand this part to Nikki. But Nikki, could you kind of speak to some of the experiences that you've had here where things have gone wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I started looking at this problem some time ago and actually ended up having a number of conversations with people on both the vendor side and the law firm side to understand the dynamic a little bit better. And some of the stories that I heard from both sides were just extraordinary. So I can share some of those, but essentially, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. I think some of the mistakes that vendors sometimes make, especially at a demo, are to send the wrong people. And what I mean by that is, for example, law firms are becoming much more sophisticated in their approach to technology, including artificial intelligence technology. What I've seen happen occasionally is salespeople sent to a demo where the people at the demo on the law firm side are able to ask quite complex questions about how the AI works or what really sits behind it, and the salespeople are simply unable to answer the questions. Or, you don't need to send someone who has legal experience, but if you send somebody who has zero experience of what it's like to work in a law firm or what the legal environment is like, that's also complicated. Approaching the wrong people at a firm, I know it can be difficult, especially sometimes where people like me may not necessarily be on an external website. So how do you find the right people to approach? But it's always a bad look if a vendor goes straight to partners at a firm in an attempt to circumvent technology processes that are in place at the firm. And that just backfires in the end because those processes still actually have to be undergone. There is no real way to circumvent, but what you do is you undermine people who actually might be making the budgetary decisions about what technology moves forward and what does not. I also think I've had experience myself, and I've heard from other people as well, where a demo is provided from, a Starbucks, for example, or a cafe, and you can hear people ordering coffee in the background or a coffee machine going. It's not ideal, and obviously there will be circumstances in which someone is trapped at an airport, for example, and that's completely fine and understandable as long as it's set out up front and an option is provided to rearrange the meeting. I've also heard on the law firm side, of course, it's no good to approach a vendor like an adversary from the beginning because you're just not going to set yourself up for a successful relationship. I heard a story once from a vendor who said that a particular firm was interested in piloting their technology along with several other similar types of technology, but would not provide the vendor with clarity around what success looked like for the pilot, which really prevented the vendor from being able to set the pilot up in such a way that it had a hope of succeeding. So from my perspective, it's really important from both sides of the equation for people to just be upfront and transparent and really crystal clear about what success looks like, to set everybody up for the best possible output. And I mean, it should go without saying that professionalism and respect on both sides is just a no-brainer. Matt, I'm sure you have a lot that you have experienced over your years in the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, I was kind of thinking how the last meeting that I took earlier this week, or that we went to, there was a joke, and we have a great relationship with this firm, but there was a joke that we have more than you, so we're ready now. And that made me think of sending the right people or the wrong people to the demo. Often sending too many people can give the wrong impression, right? It does become this me versus you type of approach. And then as I think through my history of giving demonstrations, and again, I should apologize for the unique circumstances we're in here where I do have my son home from daycare, so you may hear him in the background, but often thinking about what the audience experience is was not front and center because I was so focused on showcasing everything I knew about our technology and how great our technology was, and was really missing the boat on performing or providing something that was of value to the audience and really hitting on what mattered to them. And again, I think that kind of plays into this mindset that we put so much effort and thought into the technology that we create that we sometimes feel like that's the important piece to show. But the reality is showing what value it can provide and making sure that everyone who's in that room gets the information that they need and isn't necessarily interested in how well you can show all the bells and whistles of something. I also, just looking at this list here, to reiterate kind of my point in the previous slide, is I think transparency is really important here, right, as it pertains to communication, setting timelines, setting those success criteria, setting an example for who you'd like to see inside of the meeting and how detailed you want to get into some of those conversations, so we can avoid using everybody's time for maybe not the outcome that we're hoping to gain. As we continue on here, we thought we would break this up into what can vendors and firms do to improve their synergy. So I'll take the vendor side of this list here and then hand it over to Nikki for the firm side. Everything that you see here listed is how we operate our business, and we haven't created this model necessarily, but we've actually borrowed it from a variety of technology companies and software companies that have found a significant amount of success. So the first bullet point is pretty important to me, the multi-leveled relationships. I think, this is a very compelling piece to have the key contacts at each level of the firm know who to reach out to at the vendor relationship level, but also to keep in mind what Nikki had spoken to about in regards to circumventing the decision makers or those who bring in the technology. We want to avoid that at all costs, but we do want to make sure that we are having the appropriate detailed conversations with the appropriate parties, and that we provide more of a team than just one individual person. I think that the pilot, adoption planning, mutual success plans, and aligned business initiatives all play hand in hand with one another. This isn't about pitching technology. It's making sure that we understand where the firm is going and kind of what moves the needle and what metrics they're focused on, and then building these mutually successful plans behind it. There is interaction that is required with that, and often what we find is that if someone's uninterested in putting together a mutual success plan with us, we may not be in the same time frame, right? We may not have the level of interest that we thought we once had. So it's a good way for us to engage. Is this worthy of both sides and both parties' time? And then pilot and adoption planning, to me, is thinking about how do we spend our time most successfully when we evaluate technology, and then let's actually look toward, if this goes right, how do we assure adoption? I think I would speak for everybody when I say no one's looking to engage in an evaluation or a POC just for it to be unsuccessful. It's a resource pull from a time perspective. There's a lot of effort that goes in, and ultimately the hope is that this is something that solves a pain point and a problem. So I think it's really important to plan ahead to make sure that we've identified those, and often that includes check-in points and making sure that we're hitting milestones, but again, the adoption planning that comes behind it. And then I think the professionalism all around is we need to be okay hearing no. We need to be okay hearing it's not on our radar at this point in time. We need to be okay with the fact that, well, it is our livelihood to generate revenue for our business. The same is for everybody in that room probably, and timing does have a big play in that. So ensuring that we're focusing on building these relationships, we're supporting the business, its initiative, and the company as a whole. And then again, I think looking toward what is success beyond a purchase of technology. It's no longer a transaction of money and software, but actually a relationship and a partnership.
Yeah, I really love that, Matt. And I think it's something that Litera does particularly well is to really reach out and understand what a firm wants from the relationship, what they're looking for out of the technology, and then gearing a particular demo or a pilot towards that end. And so from a law firm perspective, I think being upfront is really key. And when I say be upfront, what I mean is, in terms of a pilot, understand and explain to the vendor what you're looking for to get out of it. If you are wanting to implement a piece of technology, explaining to the vendor exactly what the use case is that you're looking to address with that technology is really beneficial. It also provides the vendor with the opportunity to explain where the technology meets that use case and where it might fall slightly short. Having a relationship with a vendor enables you to then have a conversation as well about whether the technology can evolve to better meet that use case over time. And respecting the vendor's expertise, to me, talking to a number of vendors about this kind of thing, there's nobody who knows their product better than the vendor themselves. There's no one who better understands how to drive adoption of their particular product than a vendor who has run through pilots with many, many firms in the past. So actually reaching out to the vendor, rather than assuming on the law firm side that you have the expertise about exactly how to run a pilot, some vendors that I've worked with have extraordinarily beneficial experience to share about why certain pilots worked and others didn't. Why not leverage that expertise and use it internally where it suits your particular environment? And in that way, you can really look at the relationship as something that enables mutual growth. Rather than focusing on the dynamic of buyer-seller, look at the relationship as one in which two parties are coming together for the exact same purpose, which is to leverage technology to improve the practice of a law firm. And if you look at it like that, as two entities with a common aim, it's possible to see any vendor relationship as an opportunity to grow together, rather than as a mere commercial transaction. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to identify the vendors with whom to partner. I think at this stage, because the ecosystem has evolved significantly, it's no longer simply about what is the best fit in terms of technology. That is obviously part and parcel of it. I mean, the technology is the basis. You have to make sure that you have the right tech for the use case. But assuming that there are perhaps a number of different entities with technology that could meet a use case, how do you identify the vendor with whom you want to establish this sort of relationship? And I think that's something that we will be proceeding to talk about.
Absolutely. And as you talk about that, Nikki, I think about how I've had good partnerships in the time that I've been in the legal space. And the majority of the time, it hasn't been sharing secret sauce between firms, but it has been speaking to what's worked and what hasn't in the past. I think that's a great point of what you should look for in a partnership. So as we proceed through here, these are tips for the law firm on how to identify those suitable partners, and I'll hand this back to you.
Thanks, Matt. And so this list is something that I have come up with after working with a number of different vendors, and again, looking across the stable of vendors that I've interacted with and trying to understand what really were the key signals of a vendor with whom it made sense to partner, and why those attributes lent to a relationship that was stronger in that sense. One of those things is that everybody you meet from a vendor is someone you think, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. This person is someone with whom I'd like to sit down and have a cup of coffee. It's clear that the vendor has made an investment in their people, and it's not just one or two people who lead the way. It's really everyone you meet across an organization has a certain level of expertise and is a pleasure to deal with. User focused is, again, it should go without saying, but it sometimes does not. So if you get a vendor who approaches you who is not really interested in learning about the internal use case or how your practitioners work, it's unlikely that they are going to then be able to leverage their technology in a way that will really meet those users' needs. So looking for that real interest in the way that your firm works is important, and which is the following point as well, just a real interest in understanding and listening to your users. I generally find that vendors who are interested in the community generally, by that I mean holding webinars like this, really an interest in progressing legal technology in a kind of broad way, rather than just through their narrow part of the technology industry. That tends to indicate a vendor who really curious and will evolve and will adapt along with the industry. And so they're forward thinking. They, for example, are able to suggest how they might change a tool or adapt a tool to more particularly meet your needs. And frequently, vendors who are really good partners often have unique approaches to marketing. So maybe instead of just putting ads out on LinkedIn, they also have a blog with a number of different industry individuals, or maybe they've set up, an awards system or something that sets them apart. Again, that kind of creativity generally speaks to a vendor that has the level of quality of creativity in their technology as well. And so really what you're looking for is a vendor with whom you interact and you think, this is not just a sales pitch, it's real quality.
And as we were talking about this, Nikki, I recognize that the value comes from you so much more than I, especially to the audience during this webinar. So I do want to run through this very quickly, but be conscious of time and at least provide the audience with the concept of a potential action item to take away from this. And if we have time for Q&A, we can absolutely do so. The list that I have here from things that we've kind of pointed out as tips for vendors, how to change your approach. I don't list these items here because this is the way that we conduct our business, not just because this is what we do. I actually list these items because this is the way that we've had to evolve our business. So we've had to evolve our business to make sure that we are providing these types of components, right? These quarterly business reviews to make sure that we're online and that as your business is evolving, we're staying in tune with that, right? And providing metrics and key performance indicators to show that, right? If we can't measure it, we kind of have this concept here internally. If we don't measure it, it's not that important. If we can't measure it, it doesn't really give us the ability to show that value. The account planning concept and some of those mutual success plans are really to just make sure that everybody has skin in the game. I often say that when I walk into a room, there isn't anyone in there who hasn't dealt with an investment that wasn't adopted, isn't currently experiencing that, or doesn't fear that, right? So we're all in this together to ensure that adoption is met. That means that it's the right solution for the problem, and ultimately we can get there together if we both accept some of the risk associated with it. Taking time, right? I've said time and time again, going slower actually allows us to go faster, right? When we skip steps, value is lost. Individuals are not brought into the mix. If we start just talking about how we can get this across the line, we've lost all camaraderie in that relationship, and we've really lost anything that we could measure in regards to ensuring that this is successful. And then I think that last one is just actively respond to feedback, reiterate, user-focused development, right? These are customer advisory boards. These are communities. These are just interactions where we can ensure that what we're hearing is what we are evaluating our technology gains against, and that not only are we developing it and releasing it, but that we are actually speaking with our customers to ensure that what we've created is what they had hoped to get, right? And I'm sure everyone has seen a variety of those images where what we designed is not what the user was actually looking for. And there was actually an analogy that was brought up to me yesterday, which is around the concept of not putting down the sidewalk because people will walk around it, but putting down grass, allowing people to create their own path and then laying the sidewalk over that. So with just a minute to go here, I first want to thank Nikki. Thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure working with you. I know that you've had some travel, and with the scenario that's going on where many of us are having to work from home and find reasons for that, I really do appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure chatting, Matt.
I do want to give you an opportunity to speak to your blog, because I know that many of the topics we covered here you've put into great detail. So if you take a moment just to let the audience know, and then I'll kind of give us some last actionable items that potentially we could walk away with and hand it back to Jenny.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I have a blog. It's called Tower of Babel, and you can find it at babel-law.com. And I do go into some detail on what we've spoken about today.
Wonderful. We can't fit it all in 30 minutes, but definitely some great reads. And then the last thing I just say is just as we think about how we can approach things a bit better, I encourage transparency. I know it's difficult to respond to outreach, but encouraging the individual on the other end to know that, hey, I have best interest in mind for my firm. I hope that we can get together when the time is right. And I think the sitting on the same side of the table is a great approach, right? So rather than facing this as why did you bring a basketball team to this meeting, or we have more folks than you, really putting the problem out there front and center, learning to identify and do the proper discovery and education around what each counterparty can provide to one another, I think is a great way to do that, and really just an optimistic attitude going into those meetings. I know, unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but we can send those out afterwards. Jenny, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity and the platform.
Of course. Thank you so much, both of you, again, for joining us today. And all of you, for those at home, if you'd like to see what we have coming up, or if you want to check out any of our past webinars, we've got a bunch of really great ones, especially with regards to our Industry Insight series. All you have to do is go on to litera.com/webinars. We hope to see you again soon, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. Take care.